I'm a psychiatrist by profession, and over the course of my career, I have dealt with many people who have strange and unusual problems. However, one case in particular disturbed me more than any other. There was a family of 3 who lived next door to me. They were a married couple in their 60s, and they had a son who was about 30 years old. The son was what we call in Japan a 𝚜𝚑𝚎𝚗𝚋𝚜𝚎, somebody who is introverted, reclusive and isolated, someone who has withdrawn from social contact. We never saw the son. People who are 𝚜𝚑𝚎𝚗 usually lock themselves away in their rooms and avoid others. I didn't hear about his condition directly from his parents. I assume they didn't want to discuss it. In Japan, people are very concerned about appearances, and having a son who is 𝚜𝚑𝚎𝚗 is an embarrassment. As the days passed, their son went out less and less. Eventually, he never came out of the house at all. Every night, from his bedroom window, the furious voice of his mother could be heard screaming and shouting at him. Whenever I met the poor woman, she smiled and said hello, but the strain was showing in her face. She became pale and haggard. It had been almost 6 years since anyone had seen the son. One day, a father knocked on my door and asked me to come to his house. He knew I was a psychiatrist, and since we were neighbors, I decided to do what I could to help the family. When we got to the front door, the mother was there waiting for us. She led me upstairs to her son's room. She banged on the door with her fist and shouted, "We're coming in." Then, she burst into the room and shrieked, "Are you going to sleep forever? Get up, you lazy good for nothing." Before I knew what was happening, she grabbed a golf club and started beating the sleeping figure under the covers. For a moment, I was struck dumb as she rained down blow after blow. Then, I sprang into action. Grabbing the golf club and wrestling her out of the room, I hurried back inside to check on her son's injuries. But when I pulled back the bed covers, I couldn't believe my eyes. Lying beneath the sheets was a mummified corpse. I stood there in absolute astonishment, staring at the pile of bones and leathery old skin. The father approached me, hanging his head in shame. "It was my wife that I wanted you to see," he said. "This has been going on for years. I can't take it anymore." A young lady called in Griffith, who lived in Burton Agnes Hall, was walking home from a nearby village. As she came close to her house, she was stopped on the road by a pair of men who were begging for money. They kindly and opened her purse to give them some money, but the evil men saw she was wearing a diamond ring. The vicious pair demanded that she hand over her jewelry. The men grabbed the diamond ring off her finger, and when she resisted, the evil men beat her savagely with a club and fled, and managed to crawl the distance to the gateway of her home at Burton Agnes Hall, where she was found by a servant. She was taken to her family, but was so badly injured that she died of her wounds a few hours later. But before she died, she made a strange request that shocked her family. She asked that her head be removed from her body and that it should remain within the house or terrible things would happen. Not wanting to carry out the unusual request, her family buried the poor girl in the nearby church graveyard the following day. On the night of her funeral, when everyone had gone to bed, strange loud wailing noises and banging doors kept everyone up all night. These disturbed evenings carried on for 3 days. Feeling uneasy about the series of events, they decided to exhume her body. When the cask was opened, they were faced with her bare grinning skull on her otherwise normal body. Her skull was removed and placed within the house, and the tormenting evenings stopped. A few years later, when a new family moved into the house, a box was found containing Anne's skull, and a maid threw it into a cart containing rubbish. The horses pulling the cart would not move. Instead, they reared and trembled in fear. The hall shook and pictures fell off the wall until the skull was removed from the cart and replaced inside the house. When local villagers informed the new owner about the legend of the grinning skull and Anne's death, the skull was bricked up in a wall within the house so that it could never be removed. Although nobody knows the exact location of the skull, legend has it that the skull was buried in the wall behind the picture of Anne on the main staircase. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, Anne's ghost can be seen emerging from the picture, floating down the staircase, through the house, and then down a lane behind the house where she disappears. One day, a couple went out on a date. They wanted a little bit of privacy, so they drove to a mountain known to be a good spot for young couples. A few hours later, the sun started to go down and they started to head home. Somehow they made a wrong turn and found themselves on a road they weren't familiar with. It was already late, though, so they continued down the narrow road until they found themselves in front of a tunnel. They definitely hadn't passed through it on their way in, and it was definitely creepy, but it was the only way they could go. They slowly drove into the darkness. They suddenly heard a loud bang. As soon as the darkness enveloped the car, something hit the rear window. Startled, the woman turned round to see what it was, but she didn't see anything. There weren't even any other cars behind them. As far as she could tell, they were completely alone in the tunnel. The banging started getting louder by the minute. Her partner began to speed up in an attempt to get out of the tunnel faster. The banging kept on going on, and it sounded as if dozens of things were striking the car from all directions. The man pressed his foot harder on the gas pedal. They both wanted to get somewhere with people as soon as possible. The tunnel ended after what seemed like an eternity, and shortly thereafter they found their way to a small gas station on the side of the road. The two got out of the car and felt relief as they stood under the bright lights. Just as they were getting ready to get back in the car, the woman noticed that there were handprints all over the windows. They were in all sizes. Shaken, they asked the gas station worker to clean the windows for them. The two sat back down in the car and watched as the man quickly got to work on cleaning the windows. As he wiped and scrubbed, the two in the car felt a cold fear creep up their spines. He continued scrubbing all the same, but when he finished all of the windows, he cocked his head to the side and walked up to the driver's side window and knocked lightly. "I'm sorry," he said, "but all of these handprints are on the inside."